Hi, welcome back to another episode of SEO on Air. I'm your host Aaron, and today we have Jarrod Lopiccolo, CEO and co-founder at Noble Studios. We talk about effective strategies to improve website rankings, the foundational components for a thriving agency, and the tools to measure the effectiveness of SEO efforts. I hope you enjoyed this episode.
When you got to, like, let's say digital marketing and Noble Studios, were you always interested in things happening on the internet, or did that kind of spur over time?
It actually started early days. I was set to be one of the youngest architects in about 34 of the United States. I had graduated high school at 16. And what I found working at an architectural firm was that they had this concept called user-centered or user-centric design, where you effectively, created a branding touch point, no matter where that human was along the experience path with a physical building. So if it was a restaurant, it was everywhere you could have a brand touch point, this architecture firm effectively designed. And one of those things was a website. And then they had, multi-touch menu boards and, all these kinds of interaction pieces. And I really gravitated towards that digital experience versus the physical experience. And that kind of got me excited about, and I've always been sort of an early adopter of technology, but that got me really excited about this idea of building digital experiences. And starting that 20 years ago, it was just really a sort of a new frontier. And we felt like we had, okay, give us a digital hammer and a digital wrench and a digital screwdriver, and we could build the internet. And so that's what kind of led us to gravitate towards it, was this idea that, humans can have not only physical experiences, but digital experiences. And that just, really resonated with us, that we just saw it as an open green field to experiment and have fun with.
We can do right now is kind of build that hypothetical situation, and then based on, well, let's say your ideal client, we can just move forward from there. So we've mentioned,
Sure.
I think, travel and tourism a couple of times, and I'm wondering, is that, let's say, a good starting point for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm really passionate about travel and tourism. And so, yeah, let's dive in.
All right. So I am Mr. Monopoly. That's my name, actually. And I'm trying to start off the travel and tourism business, primarily, let's say, just for now, USA. Where in USA? California, I think, would be. I'm not really too sure if this really factors into everything else I'm going to say, but just trying to give as much context as I can. I come to you now for kind of a little bit of advice or consultants. I'm not really approaching Noble Studios because I don't really think their services include entrepreneurship as well.
No, it does not.
Right. So I'm coming to you directly, Mr. Jarrod. Can you help me out with kind of starting off this travel and tourism business? What would be, let's say, some stepping stones for me to kind of get off the ground?
Yeah, great question. So I think, and it's interesting, over the years, being as an entrepreneur for the last 20 years, there's a sort of mantra or a belief that I have now. It's about paying it forward. So I love to actually work with entrepreneurs. I love to, even though we don't offer it as a service, for me, it is a part of what I like to do and provide that as a sort of advisory service. And I do have a lot of entrepreneurs that I talk with. Some I go to and some come to me. And I would say that when starting a business, I think it's really critically important to look at a few factors. I think one of them is always look at the market demand. Right? Does the market demand actually offer enough space for you to create a business and serve that demand? I think that's critically important, because maybe it's like you can maybe you can serve it for only a year, but then you can't. Then you don't want to build infrastructure and everything else, and so you got to look to make sure that whatever you're going to create, that there's a market demand and you can service it for some good period of time, 3, 5, whatever, 10 years. So I think that's first and foremost, identify a need, and then you know how to effectively fill that need. Then I think you need to really start at the highest level of creating a vision for your company, right? Like, what will this look like in 10 years from now? How will I know what success means or looks like? Can I measure it? Can I define it? And so setting a vision, and it's okay to revisit that vision. I wouldn't revisit it every month, but every year, kind of recheck in on it, make sure it's good. Maybe make some tweaks, because what you found, servicing that market demand is that they want things this way, and so you might have to adjust. But really going into that, creating that vision. I think then I would say the third thing is really about creating core values or core principles, right? So you know what the rules are effectively, like you know how far you're going to take, your business. So if you have one of those asshole clients coming in and you look at your principles and you say, you know what, these aren't aligning with my principles, it acts as a filter, sort of a beacon, a waypoint, a way of doing a self-select, with these clients. So I think having, core values, core principles, I think are critical. Then I would say the other last two factors is, and this is not only when you start a business, but also when you want to grow a business, is about having what I would call being prepared and being ready. So that means looking at your infrastructure, making sure you have a healthy talent. Like maybe every time you sell to this market demand, you need more employees. So do you have a healthy, strong recruitment strategy? Or maybe every time you service this market demand, maybe it's manufacturing and you have this new plastic, I'm making this up. And, so all of a sudden, wow, I've closed a new piece of business into this market demand. I need to add infrastructure. Do I have enough warehouse space? Do I have enough or do I have enough machinery? Do I have access to these materials? So really understanding, if you achieve success by producing into this market demand, how do you scale with that and that infrastructure? And then it comes down to even tools. What tools are you going to need? What software are you going to need? What partnerships are you going to need? So really kind of understanding that. And then the last piece I would just say, which is critical, is just understanding capital, right? Do you have access to investors? Do you have access to line of credits, right? Do you have a home? A bank will use your home as a way of, leveraging it against you to give you a line of credit. So if you have cash flow issues, you can borrow from that line of credit and pay it back when you get paid. But I think that's another critical. And then I think the last piece of capital is really around profitability, making sure that you have found a way to serve this market demand, but actually do it profitably, right? And I believe in that as an entrepreneur. I don't like I'm going to show a loss for 10 years and borrow investor dollars, and then one day I'm going to turn that profit. I feel like it's cheating a little bit, because you're cutting out everybody else that doesn't have access to that capital. And maybe someone would argue and say, well, that's just the name of the game. But I actually think I like the playing field to be a lot more equal. And so for me, I wouldn't recommend personally borrowing a lot of money, because it's a lot easier to spend someone else's money. It's a lot easier to spend someone else's money not very responsibly than it is your own, right? When it's your own money, you're going to be like, maybe we don't need 5 TVs in the conference room. Maybe we only need 1. And I saw a lot of that during the Silicon Valley days and those early investor days. It's so much wasted money, as opposed to putting it to the things that matter. So I think it's important to again, when you do build this business, you make sure that you're as profitable as you can be in that year 1 or end of year 1.
But let's say I kind of have the core values kind of written down. I have a good idea of what I see my business ending up in 5-10 years. I'm not going to pretty much have a detailed plan of it, but I kind of have an idea of where I want it to be. How, even if let's say the investment side of things are kind of working out in a way, would it be better for me to continue my journey on my own, or should I start kind of building up a team right now? Just in-house to kind of build everything? And maybe an additional part of that would be, should I start outsourcing some things?
Yeah, really good. These are great questions. I think, and it's something that I like to talk about, in that I have a strong belief that you need to surround yourself with as smart, if not smarter people than you, right? And as an entrepreneur, I don't believe that you're going to get to success on your own. I actually do believe that you need to be, surrounded with a team that has common interests, common values, and are all sort of rowing in the same direction, right? And so when you think about this idea of I'm starting out, I'm by myself, I'm starting to show some success, I'm a huge believer that you need to start partnering at that point, right? And so to your point, maybe it's subcontracting, maybe it's other businesses that you build a strategic partnership with. So you say, hey, every time, I'm making this up, but every time we sell a website, I'm going to outsource the custom photography to you, and I'm going to bring you in as a strategic partner. Now all of a sudden I look bigger, I feel bigger. I'm tapping into someone who has an expertise that I don't have, even though maybe I can say that I do custom photography, but maybe I'm not that good at it. I'm bringing in an expert. So now all of a sudden I'm borrowing from their brand equity and their business equity, and that's making me a more successful business. And I do believe in that transparency of growing and saying, hey, I've got this strategic partnership with this type of service or this type of product or this type of company, and I'm bringing them to the table because I have done the due diligence and vetted to make sure that I'm only bringing the best people to the table. So definitely huge into the idea of starting out, surrounding yourself with smart people, building strategic partnerships. And I guess the last piece I would say is that a lot of times people can't afford to have a robust management team right off the bat, right? It's expensive. These people are usually veterans in their career. They've been to multiple companies. They're coming to the table with lots of knowledge and structure and things that they've effectively gathered, right? That they've used to make themselves better over the years. That's expensive talent to have at the table. And it takes a long time to grow that talent and get that team there. So I'm a huge believer in building and forming what I call a board of advisor group. It's different than a board of a directors group, right? A board of directors group, you usually have to offer some level of incentive. You have to pay them. You have to give them some portion, some shares. Maybe they're phantom shares. Maybe they have, a different kind of stock. But a board of advisory group is really a temporary group that you're assembling in that moment of time that helps you solve a problem that you're working on. So maybe the next 3 years, I want to double my company. Well, then I would want to maybe put someone on the board of advisory group who's done this before, right? Maybe I want to put someone on there that has not only grown a company or doubled the company in size, but one that's in my actual space of services or product or products. Or maybe I want to bring someone in who knows partnerships really well, because part of that growth, I need to develop deeper and more strategic partners. And so it's key to put together people that maybe aren't going to be there for 10 years, but just are currently helping you work on the exact moment in time. Then you can disassemble that board of advisor group. You can ask one to leave. You can add in another, and as you kind of go along that journey. So that is something that I've seen work really well. People love it. The only thing I would caution is I wouldn't ever stick an accountant or a lawyer on your board of advisory group, because ultimately those people are dream killers and they're not risk takers. And as an entrepreneur, you need to have people around you that are curious and that are okay to take risk. And you can always consult with those people. You should always have a lawyer. You should always have, accountants or, legal, financial advisors. But to have them on the board will really, they're going to kill the dreams, or they're going to kill that mode. And you need people that are like, I can do this. I believe in the impossible. Like, those are the ones you want next to you.
Speaking to one of those categories, the financial aspect of it, as an entrepreneur, if I'm trying to find funding for my business, what would be some, let's say, ideal ways to kind of go about that?
Yeah, it's an interesting idea that, do you find funding first and then start the business, or do you build funding while you're starting the business, right? And so a lot of times what I've seen, the successful, raw, no bullshit entrepreneurs, right? It's they actually start a business while they're employed somewhere else. And it doesn't mean that they're taking away from their employer to do this. It means they're actually doing two jobs in one life. And you're still 100%, 40 hours a week, if that's what your engagement is with your employer, 100%, 40 hours a week. And then guess what? There's a lot more time that we have in life outside of that you can then spend the time. So now all of a sudden your personal finances are there. Maybe you start to save money. You don't go out to dinner. You don't go out to eat. You're not going some vacations. Maybe you sold a car, whatever it is, but you're still able to provide and survive off the money you're making as an employer while you're sort of moonlighting, right? While you're doing two jobs at the same time. And a lot of places require this. You live in a very expensive cost of living location like Hawaii or San Francisco or whatnot. Sometimes these, or New York's and whatnot, London's, sometimes people have, two jobs oftentimes, and they're moonlighting on the side. And so I would more subscribe to that philosophy around like, hey, because again, back to like, you're going to spend your money the most, wisely as opposed to someone else's. So I would probably start there first. Prove that there's a market demand, right? So that you don't just borrow all this money on a fury, or that ChatGPT helped you write a business, plan on. Like, actually start it, bootstrap it, throw your own money into it. If you got a partner, have them throw a little bit of money into it, prove that there's a market demand there. And then at that point, you can decide, what, am I going to need more funding to accelerate this? Maybe I would go to family and friends first. Maybe you would set up some sort of a stock option, type of opportunity. Or maybe you do go the more, traditional route of looking for a private investor or, an equity investor, of some kind. But if my real advice though would be prove the model, use your own money first to do it, and then at least you're being responsible with other people's money. And I think that's really critical, because for me personally, I would feel really guilty if I didn't prove the model. I somehow put a really good pitch together, and I got $1 million and I just blew this money, because at the end of the day, that money was earned and it is someone's that you just spent, irresponsibly.
So speaking of culture, let's try to talk about agency culture. I know that was kind of like a very plain segue, but I'll try my best to kind of keep going on. When it comes to agency culture, with my Mr. Monopoly brand and travel and tourism, I'm trying to kind of build an environment where they are going to thrive no matter what kind of happens, let's say client side. What would be, let's say, the foundational elements I would need to do that?
Yeah, I think when building a culture, I think it's really important that, culture is something that is not something you can just create, right? It has to start with authenticity. I think you also have to expose and share and have a shared vision, right? So here's the company's vision, and you want to make sure it's shared and understood by all. And then I think that transparency piece comes in the form of authenticity, where you're actually transparent about the direction you're going. You're building trust when you're transparent. If something goes wrong, you don't try to hide it. You talk through it. You build off of it. And by doing all those things, right, by having a shared vision, by being authentic, and by being transparent, by being positive. I think positivity, you build good culture when it's a positive, fun, exciting environment. I think what comes out of that is trust, right? And that's one of the most important attributes of a healthy culture, is that there's trust. And trust means a lot of things, right? I trust the leadership. I trust that they have my best intention. I trust that the company's going in the direction that I want to be aligned with. I trust that they are looking out for me as an individual. And the goal would be that if you ask someone that's contributing and participating in culture, you want to ask them, like, are you in an environment where you're able to basically become the best version of yourself, right? Is there opportunities for you to grow? Is there opportunities for you to be vulnerable, but be safe, make mistakes, have failures, have wins and successes, and celebrate and have those accolades? So I think it really comes down to those pieces, like shared vision, authenticity, and then the team member that's contributing to culture needs to know that they're in the best place to release and grow the best version of themselves.
What if, let's say, I try to do that and I have majority of my team kind of in focus with that? They are in line, they kind of understand, they're on the same page. But there comes across one bad egg who I feel might not entirely fit with the company culture. I have a chat with him once in a while, tell him, hey, listen, we can kind of work on it. But let's say month 2, month 3, it's still not really a good fit.
Yeah.
I feel like I know the answer, but what would be a good way to kind of deal with that?
Yeah, it's, this is the hardest part about business, is people, right? And you have to believe that one bad apple can spoil the bunch. You have to subscribe to the idea that if you have, cancer in your thumb, and the only way to fix it is to take the cancer off. You have to do that to preserve the rest of the body, right? And so I think you have to first start with, not denying that this negative person is affecting the rest of the culture, no matter how good they are, right? And that's usually what happens, right? You usually find that someone is an asshole, but they're really, really good at the work they do. In fact, they do 2 times the amount of work that everybody else does. And that, unfortunately,
they just happen to be a dick.
Yeah, you just happen to be a dick, man. And I tell you what, when you think of Ben, what are we playing? Are we playing the long game or are we playing the short game? And so you have to do what's right, and you have to release that person. But I do believe you have to work with that person first. Like, give them an opportunity. Maybe they don't know that they're not being a good person. Maybe they don't know that they're contributing negative to the culture. So I think a crucial conversation. I think you need to, give a window of time that says, look, and be very direct and set expectations. I expect that we are not going to have these conversations again in 30 days, but I'm going to check in with you, and I want to make sure you understand exactly how to show up and how not to show up, and the behavior that you're creating, or this or that. You have to be really clear with your feedback and your expectations. And then And this is what's, I think, critical. When you get to a point where you're like, I've had those conversations, I've checked in with that individual, they're still not fully doing it. Now you need to feel confident to make the decision to let this person go. And there's a tool that we use that allows us to remove the subjectivity and be objective about it. And we call it GWC, and it's borrowed from Traction, which is an entrepreneurial operating system. And GWC stands for they get it. They get it. They understand it, right? They want it. So G for get, W for want. They want the job. They want and then they have the capacity to do the job, right? They actually mentally have the capacity, or they have physically the time to do it. And if you score this individual and you say, you know what, they really don't get it. They don't get the role. They don't get this. Maybe there's another seat on the bus they can go to, or they don't want this. They don't even want the job. They don't like the seat. They don't like where they're sitting. They don't like what they're doing. So I think that gives you this objective filter to look at and say, okay, do they get it? Do they want it? And do they have the capacity to do it? And if the answer is no in one of those categories, you have to work to get that person, to invest in those areas, or you got to let them go. But oftentimes, if they're a bad seed, it's hard to turn that around. I've seen it happen, but it's not the norm. Most of the time, what's going to happen. And I guess the last thing I would say is, if you're an entrepreneur and you're in this situation, the one other use as a filter is, does their name come up all the time in a negative way? And I always say, if you're talking too much about an individual, you probably need to have a conversation with that individual. And it because you're like, well, here we are. We're talking about them again. And so that's another filter. It's like, is this person's name coming up all the time? If so, then you haven't addressed the problem.
Right. And I think that's a pretty much fair assessment. If there aren't really any, let's say, positive signs that are happening after kind of showing you, hey, listen, these are the issues, then there's not really much you can do about it. You can't really continue spending and investing your time in that. But for this example,
I was just going to say, think of it as, you don't, if you really care about other humans, you just think of it as, I don't want to waste that person's time. And right. And that's a really good filter.
Disservice to them.
Exactly right. Yeah. You're not helping them. They maybe need to be fired or let go or, or whatnot. I hate to say that, if that's the worst case scenario that happens, but they might need that as a wake up call, because, they might, if they don't get that, they might show up at the next place thinking, oh, it was the employer, and then they didn't learn. And guess what? Now a new employer is going to inherit a bad person. So you just got to think you're wasting their time if they're not going to change.
Yeah. What I was going to say was that, let's say for this hypothetical situation, the person who is kind of a bad apple has maybe turned a new leaf, showing some signs of improvement, is kind of working on getting better. But now I've come across, let's say, another hurdle. Me being Mr. Monopoly, have come across Mr. Bonopoly, and he's kind of being very competitive in this industry, trying to do his own travel and tourism as well. Is there a way I can leverage my company culture to kind of result in better competition for let's say, Mr. Monopoly? Is there a way I can use, let's say, company culture to improve productivity and efficiency?
Yes, I do. I think, at the end of the day, I think what separates a competitor, you can have all the same things, right? We offer the same services, we offer the same pricing, we offer the same quality of output, but what is going to be different is the people and so I think that will always be a massive differentiator, is how is your culture? Because at the end of the day, people make decisions to work with other people. If I'm looking at this and say everything's the exact same, they're going to make a decision based on chemistry, because that's the only thing that's left. It's like, well, you know what? Right. They all offer the same stuff, but I really like these people. And I know that if I get into a hurdle or an issue or, and we're in a stormy path, I know that I'm going to navigate that better with this company because I like them and I have good chemistry than I do with this other one. So I do think you can leverage your culture in that sense, in terms of building chemistry and creating meaningful connections with clients. I also think that, which is important, is to attract similar people to your culture, right? And so you can actually incentivize your culture by creating employee referral programs where all of us, and we do that. We offer $2,500 for any employee that makes a referral into us, and they get $2,500 over the course of a year. If we hire this individual, they get a chunk of money up front, and then at 6 months, if that employee that they referred is still working there, they get another chunk of money. And after 1 year, if that employee they referred in is still working, they get another chunk of money. And they ultimately want to work with people that they like, right? Because people want to work with people that they like. And so I think there's an opportunity to not only leverage your culture as a differentiator, for clients against competitors, but you can also grow your culture for more of that type of culture by activating your existing culture and creating incentives for bringing in people that are like-minded.
In let's say year one, I have a company culture where I kind of foster this growth for everyone to kind of grow and again work to their best productivity levels. Would it be my responsibility as a business owner to have this kind of culture every month, or should I be kind of organizing a person to kind of be like, hey, you are the community culture coordinator for the company, and you will now take care of all the culture activities? Is there a way to kind of go around that?
Yeah, this definitely, I'm sure that some people will, have more to add to this. I think it's important that culture is fostered and it remains and stays organic as much as possible, because you don't want to feel like it's an artificial culture. And that's going to happen year 1 or year 20. You always want to make sure that there's an element of authenticity and organicness when it comes to culture. Now, that being said, I think everyone contributes to culture. I think a lot of culture in those early days are modeled by the behavior of the founders, right? And so if you naturally are an inclusive person, your culture is likely going to adopt that, or you're not, you're going to attract people that are also, have those similar values of inclusivity, but as you grow and as you get bigger, right, all of a sudden, the culture, maybe you have so many people that not everyone does connect with the founders or the leaders as much as maybe those early days. And then I do think that it's okay to build structure. One of the things we did that happened through the pandemic, because we've always been known to have really healthy culture, but that's because we were always investing into it. Like, let's going out to lunches and let's do Throwback Thursdays at 4:00. We go to the Keg and we have a beer. Let's have, on Tuesday Studios is what we call them. Every Tuesday we get together. Let's have a paper airplane contests and, like all kinds of fun stuff. That's really hard to do when you're remote, right? And so what we did was we actually formulated a culture committee. And it's all volunteers, people that wanted to be on there, and they handle events in our company like our holiday party. And so they're in charge of finding the venue. They're in charge of, creating a theme, because we always do a fun theme for our holiday party. We have every year a summer solstice barbecue, where everyone comes together and we have games and we do barbecue and we fly out employees that are now remote. And so when you think about, all of these, every company has all of these natural events that happen, right? Whether it's federal holidays that we take off, and there's opportunities to have more structure around those, but it doesn't remove the authenticity. If anything, it's seeded with people that care about the company culture and want to do more things with the company culture. So I do think over time you can start to build structure. Maybe there's a cultural ambassador, right? There's some person that's assigned, but I think it's important that they have their structure, but they don't try to artificially create culture. And you always know when someone's like, come on, everybody get up and dance, and nobody wants to dance. And you're like, this is awkward. I don't want to do this. It's like, instead you create the environment, you create the opportunity for organic moments and culture to happen, but you don't, prescribe it the way it needs to be. So I think, again, it's a balance of early days. Culture's typically created and followed and mimicked by founders or leaders. As the company grows and gets bigger, it's very organic. It's borrowed and leveraged from each other. And then I think it's okay to add some level of structure as long as you maintain authenticity and you don't try to create, these awkward moments of culture. And because it's organic, you got to foster that organic. And I think the last thing I was going to say is feedback I think it's critical to create feedback from your culture so that you know what's bothering them and where there's issues and, you know, things like that. Because if you're never listening and you're only talking, you're never going to get their point of view. And then again, it's going to turn into like an unauthentic cultural experience.
So thanks for the call, Jarrod. It's been great. I'm more than happy that you've made it into very bite-sized information for me.
All right. Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks for watching that episode. I hope you enjoyed. For more videos like this, make sure you like and subscribe.